Hey everyone, welcome to class. Today we're going to talk about a very crucial skill in the world of art, drawing. Last week we learned about the importance of composition. If you haven't watched that episode yet, make sure you do that first before continuing with this lesson, because even good drawing skills won't improve an image with poor composition. Like I said, today's lesson is going to be on drawing. So what is drawing? This may seem like a simplistic question, because we've all been scribbling and doodling since we were little, right? But drawing actually covers a lot. Here's an easy definition that we'll be using for today's lesson. Drawing is making representational marks using lines. Drawing is a very fundamental skill that is easy to learn and hard to master, which means we can always grow in our drawing skills. That's why, for today's lesson, we won't be making any pretty pictures. Instead, we'll be trying out some drawing exercises to build the control and coordination needed to strengthen your skills so that you can better draw whatever you want. I'll show you the tools we need, give you some pointers, and then we'll do the exercises together. First, the tools. You can draw with a pencil, pen, charcoal, pastel, color pencil, a stick, even paint. There's so many ways to make a line and so many materials out there, but let's stick with the most accessible, most forgiving, and most simple drawing tool, the pencil. With this tool, we can focus purely on sharpening our drawing skills without being distracted by other factors, like mixing colors, for example. So here's what you're gonna need for your lesson today. For today, you'll need a printout of this episode's drawing exercises, a regular yellow pencil, or a mechanical pencil. There's lots of specialty pencils and erasers and other tools you could potentially use, but the skill is more important than the instrument. So whatever you have on hand right now is totally fine for today's lesson. Now, let's go over some practical drawing tips. First, drawing with a pencil isn't exactly the same as writing with a pencil. This is because we're able to adjust our grip on the pencil to accommodate for different needs. We can talk more about those different techniques in another lesson. For today, just keep the pencil upright as you usually do, which is good for drawing on a flat surface. Second, don't forget to draw lightly. As a reminder, always draw lightly till you're certain of what you're drawing. Third, be patient. Today's exercises may be tedious or possibly even challenging, but struggling with our limitations is necessary for growth. I remember plenty of moments of frustration when I was a young artist. Sometimes I couldn't wrap my mind around what I was seeing. Other times, my hand just didn't have the skill to produce what I wanted. It frustrated me that I couldn't produce something perfect, and my frustration would show in my artwork. My pencil lines would get darker and darker, and the pressure of the eraser would start tearing the paper. So before we begin, I just want to encourage you, whenever you hit a wall, take a deep breath, keep your hand light, and try again. Now that you have these tips, we're ready to move on to our drawing exercises. We're gonna be building coordination in your wrist and your arm, which is what will enable you to have better control over your drawing tool. So grab your materials and let's begin. First, let's do some warm-ups. Turn your worksheet over and let's draw on the back. Most of us like to draw in the same way that we write. We usually make small movements with our wrists. But when we restrict our tool to the small movement of our wrists, our lines also become restricted and can sometimes feel stiff. Try it for yourself. Now let's turn the paper over again. For the first part of our drawing exercise, try to draw a straight line at the top of the first box at the top of your worksheet. Use only small wrist movements from one end of the box to the other, and try to draw it as straight as you can. For the sake of today's lesson, I'll be drawing a little darker than you should be drawing, just so that you could see my lines better. Don't worry if it's not perfect, and try to resist the temptation to erase any mistakes. We want to be able to see the line clearly so that we know how we can improve next time. Try drawing a few more lines in the first box, and I want you to pay attention. How does it feel? Do you feel in control of the pencil? How does your line look? You might have noticed that you had to break up the line with a lot of little lines because the length of each mark was restricted by how far your hand and wrist could move the pencil. You might also have felt a sense of control over the pencil, which makes using the wrist perfect for drawing small details. On the other hand, when we use the whole arm to draw, our lines become bigger and more fluid. So let's turn the worksheet over again to use the backside. Try moving just your arm to make some big marks. Make sure you're not moving your wrist too much. If you're not used to using your arm in this way, the tool can feel hard to control. If that's the case, here's a helpful tip. Try practicing the motion of your line before putting the pencil down on the paper. You might be right on target, or you might totally miss the mark, but that is okay. Lightly go over the same area a few times until you're able to get the shape that you desire. This is a great way to get those general shapes, and it's much quicker than using just your wrist to slowly draw all the way around the form. Okay, back to the worksheet. In the second box, go ahead and try to draw another straight line. Only this time, try to keep your wrist still and move just your arm. Try to draw the line as straight as you can. But again, don't worry if it's not perfect, and don't erase any mistakes. Try drawing a few lines, and I'm going to ask you the same questions again. How does it feel? Do you feel in control of the pencil? How does your line look? This time, you might have noticed that your line was much smoother, but maybe it was harder to get a straight line. Well, making straight lines takes practice, and so does using your arm to draw. It is great for creating general shapes and quickly covering large areas in your piece, so don't get discouraged and keep practicing. But how do you know when to use your whole arm and when to use your wrist? Let's move on to the next part of the worksheet to explore that further. In the next section of your worksheet are two circles. Let's start with the large circle on the left. Because this is a big shape, we're gonna use our arm to trace around the circle. You can try making the motion with your arm before letting your pencil touch the paper if you want. Try not to move your wrist. Go around a few times until you feel comfortable with the movement. Next, let's make a slightly smaller circle within the first circle. Remember, try not to move your wrist and just use your arm. Keep making smaller and smaller circles and pay attention to how it feels. At some point, you should notice that the movement of your arm is too big for such a small shape, and that it becomes more comfortable to switch over to using your wrist. When you reach that point, make a note of it on your paper. For the next circle on the right, we will do the opposite. Trace around the small circle while moving only your wrist. Keep making larger and larger circles and pay attention. At some point, you should notice that the movement of your wrist is too small to draw a smooth circle. When you reach that point, make a note of it on your paper. Under the circles are two squares. Follow the same steps that you just used for the circles. Drawing straight lines will feel a little different from drawing circles, but it's the same idea. Don't forget to pay attention to the change in your movements, and make a note of the switch between wrist and arm on your paper. After doing these exercises, did you notice a difference between using your wrist and using your arm to draw? Maybe doing it one way was more difficult than the other, but being able to use both your wrist and your arm is a really important part in developing your drawing technique. The more coordination and control you have over your hand, and therefore your tool, the more accurately and vividly you can bring your vision to the paper. So keep practicing, and don't feel limited to this lesson's worksheets. Try incorporating this lesson into your drawings as you sketch and doodle and create masterpieces at home. And as you keep practicing, remember to stay patient. Even now, it's not unusual for me to encounter frustrations when I draw, but I know better now that hitting those walls is an opportunity to grow patience. And patience produces both skill and good character, so try it out. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. There's so much more to learn about drawing, and this is just the first step in building that foundation. Keep practicing, and we'll see you in the next class.